My father and my grandparents only loved my brother, who was the eldest, and they were strict with me. But the only person who was on my side in the house was my mother. I loved my mother, but there is no place for me in this house. When I turned 18, I left the house and lived by myself. Now I'm living a fulfilled life with my dearest husband and daughter. I'm grandparents and my father have both passed away, and I thought that my mother was finally free. However, my mother suddenly came to my house. She said while crying, "I want to leave the house." My mother has been living with my brother and his wife, and she had the worst 2 years of her life. My name is Layla. I'm 38 years old, and my husband and I both work. It has been 20 years since I left home upon entering college. The only times I've gone to my parents' house in the last 20 years were when I went back to get my stuff, my brother's wedding, and my father's funeral. Why have I stayed away from my parents' home? That's because since we were small, I was raised being compared to my older brother. Leo, firstborn son, was the most important person for my father and my grandparents. It was a so-called firstborn son cult, and they had a special love for my brother. They adored him so much that even if he hit me or took things from me, they never scolded him. And I, who was supposed to be the victim, got scolded and was told, "You are in the wrong." In other cases, for example, my brother was allowed to take after-school lessons, but I was not. Only school club activities were permitted, but my father never paid for it, so my mother helped me out. At home, my mother was the only person who stood by me and protected me. Despite my father's complaints, my mother still gave me her love and affection. I only loved my mother because my brother was spoiled from a young age. He has looked down on me ever since I can remember. When he got stressed, he kicked me as a punching bag to release his stress. I had better grades than my brother, and I wanted to go to a well-known private school, but if Layla is going to high school, I will only allow her to go to the public school closest to home. If Layla is going to high school, I will only allow her to go to the public school closest to home.
It would be a waste of tuition and transportation costs if Layla goes to a private school.
My father said my father's decision couldn't be reversed. I ended up going to a public high school closer to home, which was not what I wanted. The school didn't have a good reputation, so my brother started calling me a stupid girl after going to this school. If my sister goes to a low-level high school, people will look at me as if I'm stupid too. I didn't choose the school myself, but still, he says such things to me. It was frustrating, but there was nothing I could do, so I just cried. I didn't want to deal with my brother anymore, so I decided to leave the house right after I graduated from high school. I was sorry to leave my mother, but I just couldn't stand my brother anymore. I found a part-time job, saved money little by little, left the house when starting university, and so I started living by myself. Then you may wonder why I attended my brother's wedding when I tried so hard to stay away from him. That's because my father told me to attend my brother's wedding, and he also said he would give me $5,000 if I do so. I guess my father will spend any amount of money to keep up appearances of my brother, his eldest son. I attended the wedding in a depressed mood. My brother's happy face at that moment became a memory in a bad way. My brother made me unhappy, but he is happy. My life was a mess because of my brother, and I had led a dark life. But I met my husband Henry through work, and we got married. I had been through a lot, but at that moment, I felt happiness I had never experienced before. After I started living with my husband, my life has changed. In the new environment, I decided to leave my old self behind and be reborn. And I can now enjoy my life every day. My husband owns a company, and I work with him. The business is going well. There are no financial problems at all. A long-awaited daughter was born 2 years ago. My family is all in good health. My relationship with my husband is good, and I am living a fulfilled life, unlike when I lived in my parents' house. Then, one day, I received a call from my mother out of the blue. Would it be okay if I stay at her house for a few days? I wondered if something had happened, and I said yes. After a while, my mother arrived. After not seeing her for a while, she looked a little gaunt, and her expression was kind of dark. I'm sorry, Layla. I've just got here, but I need you to listen to me. She started talking with a dark look on her face. It was about my brother and his wife. After my father passed away, she has been living with my brother and his wife at her house. In the past, my mother has struggled with similar experiences, so she was against the idea of living with them. But she was persuaded repeatedly by my brother, and she reluctantly agreed. They have 2 children, but my mother takes care of them. His wife is lazing around at home Anotem. She goes out to drink with her friends until my brother comes home, and she is just doing whatever she wants. My mother couldn't stand it anymore, so she told his wife to at least take care of her children. But she said to my brother, "Your mom is mean to me. This is daughter-in-law bullying." And she has been cursing my mother every day since then. Their 2 children also don't listen to my mother, who is taking care of them. And his wife is treating my mother like a slave every day. My mother has been spending 2 painful years like that. She said, while she was crying, that she is worried about her grandchildren a little bit, but she can't stand a life like that anymore. I can't take it anymore. I want to leave the house. I knew that my brother had a terrible personality, but I didn't know that his wife also had a terrible personality. If I knew, I could have taken steps earlier. I felt sorry for my mother, whom I love, but I'd been unable to do anything for her for 2 years. My mother, being my mother, thought that it was not acceptable to ask me for help after all the hardships my brother had caused me, and so she hasn't been able to discuss it with me. Now that I know that my mother has been going through a hard time, I welcomed her and I decided to fight with my brother and his wife. I contacted my brother, explained the situation, and told him that I want to discuss the matter with him. My brother, however, took the stance that there was not the slightest bit of wrongdoing on his and his wife's part, and he sneered at me in a mocking tone. I said, holding back my anger as best as I could. Then he seemed to have gotten angry at me for talking back, and he started talking to me aggressively.
Who the hell do you think you are? Gibbs, if you want, why don't you live with her?
He yelled at me over the phone. When I heard him say that, I chuckled to myself. My plan was working. Sure, Mom will live with us from now on. You want to live with her because you want her pension, don't you? You must be struggling financially. Good luck. He mocked me with his self-serving fantasy, and he hung up. I told my mother that my brother has given his consent, and my husband and I started preparing for my mother's move. Since my mother's belongings had already been sorted out, it didn't take long to move them out of her house. We let her live in a condominium we owned. We decided to live separately because we wanted my mother, who'd been going through a hard time, to relax and have some time alone. My mother took care of our daughter since my husband and I both work. I didn't ask her to do it, but I was really thankful because our daughter won't be lonely that way. A few weeks after my mother moved, my brother called me. Hey, Layla, is it true that Mom lives in a condo now? Yes. Why? How can you possibly own a condo? There's no way you can afford it. He assumed that I didn't have a good job. I explained to him that I own some real estate because my husband and I own a company, and we decided to let our mother live in one of them. That's what it is. We don't have any problems taking care of Mom, so don't worry about her. When I told him, he started panicking. Give me back, Mom. It's only right. I take care of her because I'm the eldest son. If you take care of her, you will put me in a bad position. I can't let you take care of her because you guys treat her so badly. When I told my mother that my brother called me, she said that she had a call from him as well.
Mom, I want you to come back. If you don't want to come back, then I want to live with you there. Well, I was fed up with this selfish brother. I thought that he might know the address of the condo, so I told the concierge, even if my brother comes, please don't let him in.
A few days later, as I expected, the concierge contacted me and said that my brother came to the condo. When I went to the entrance, I could hear my brother making noise. When he found me, he talked to me with a smile.
Hi, Layla. It's been a while. What are you doing here? Just leave already.
He's been looking down on me, but now he is smiling at me, and that makes me sick. When I said that as I shooed him away, he began to tear up.
Actually, Emily left the house. Because my mother left the house, Emily had to do all the housework and also take care of her children. It became too much hassle for her, so she left the house. She even withdrew money from the bank before disappearing. Could you please let my kids and me live here?
My brother, who has always looked down on me, was begging me. My family is my husband, my daughter, and Mom. That's it. There is absolutely no obligation to comply. When I pushed him back, my brother broke down crying. I wondered if he was also a victim of a spoiled upbringing. As I was naively thinking, my mother came downstairs. When my brother found my mother, he started blabbing to her what he had said to me. Then my mother, who'd been listening for a while, hit my brother. But the sound of a slap on the cheek echoed. Leo, enough is enough. As my prectional crosities, and Minster Dundee and Bevernan Petery to a nudie do it via spoiled brat forever and reflect on what you've done. We have never seen our mild-mannered mother so angry, and my brother and I were both surprised.
Layla, let's go home. My mother held her hand was slightly shaking. Then my mother turned her back on my brother and began to take me home.
When I looked back, I saw him standing in a daze.
He looked somewhat miserable and pitiful. After that, he started changing. He asked his parents-in-law to take care of his children, and he started managing both work and housework. As for his wife, when she used up all the money she withdrew, she came back to my brother. He didn't forgive her, and they got divorced. I heard that there was a dispute over who would have custody of the children, but he took custody in the end and started raising them. His ex-wife started working as a live-in worker under her parents' friend to pay back the money she spent to my brother. Then one day, a year after my mother moved in, my brother and his children came to apologize. They apologized for the way they had treated my mother, and she accepted their apology. My mother praised my brother and his children for their remorse. At that time, my brother was looking at me awkwardly. My brother, who'd always behaved so aggressively and unmannerly towards me, looked like a normal person. Although he looked miserable and pitiful after my mother scolded him, I still have no intention of getting involved with him in the future. I don't intend to get along with him, nor help him, even if something happens, since what he did and said have already built up. However, I want him to be a good father for his children. I hoped slightly,